It's okay, guys. You can keep your videos on. We love to see faces. All right. So welcome everyone to Artist Talks. This is the last episode of the season, and I'm so excited to be ending it with these three amazing artists and friends here today. And so the title of the talk is Poetics of Performance. And so each of the artists today will be we'll be talking about their final SEAF works and introducing themselves. And then we'll be showing a supplemental element to the work that's currently shown at Warehouse 421. We'll be talking all things poetry, performance, mapping, writing, documenting. So you guys are in for a real treat. And so today we have with us Athoub Albusaily, Malak, Elghuel, and Nabla Yahya. And thank you all for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. My name is Nasser Alzayani. I'm the SEAF studio manager. And welcome to the final artist talk of this year's edition of Community and Critique, SEAF Cohort 7's exhibition hosted by Warehouse 421. The show is still open and will be up for another week. So please go and see it before December 20th. You can book a time to visit through Warehouse 421's website. So we're going to get started, and each of the artists will introduce their work, and then we'll move into a conversation, and then opening up finally to questions from you guys. So please write your questions in the chat, and we'll hopefully get to all of them in the last 15 minutes. So first up, we have Athoub.
Hello, everyone. This is Athoub. I'm from Kuwait. I'm currently based in Dubai. And I'll show you the works that I've done throughout SEAF. And they're mainly, I would like to call them studies. So they're mainly part of my research process. And later on, I will be showing you a video that combines all the process. Just a second to open up the PowerPoint.
Nasser, I need access.
Sorry.
So basically the work that I've done throughout SEAF really talks about ideas of border and landscape. I was very much fascinated with that invisible aspect of borders, be it a plot of land or be it the emotional aspect of borders, the ones that we carry around wherever we go. So firstly, I would like to show an overview of what I've done, the final work in SEAF. So this is the final body of work. It combines multiple metaphors together. When talking about borders, I think of their sensory experience. They're really a mirage. They don't exist. You cannot see them. You cannot feel them. You cannot touch them or smell them. And here is a work titled The Hunter and the Hunty, which are a series of 8 fishing lures that I've made. I was very much in love with the idea that hunters create them to make them the most beautiful virgin, a virgin that is very fictitious. It's not real, but it lures you and captivates you. And now this work is part of the earlier series. When I started working with SEAF, I noticed that most of my works are related to this idea of documenting the invisible. So here we see a small little tiny piece of, it's a harmonica. And I took that piece and I tried to study it and dissect it. I became like an obsessed scientist, really. So I created these studies and I tried to understand the sound of the harmonica and what it's made of. Also, its emotional experience, touching it, holding it, using it, and also keeping it. So I later ended up opening the harmonica, and through the dissection, I found many hidden layers. Um, so here, it's the harmonica altogether, but it's opened up. So I even took the screws, the shell, and I started naming each piece on my own. It's like my own science fiction book. And this is a piece I called a spine, and I tried to relate it to my own experience with the object. I talked about the rust inside, and then I later turned the piece into a list that I usually do into my work. So wherever I have something that I'm working on, it will always end up with a list. A scientific list, I would like to say, but if I can go back to the previous slide and read the instructions. So here I wrote down the instructions of how to force the sound out of the harmonica. First, be given a piece of assembled metal object. Hide it in your back pockets for a week or more. Lung extension, pretend to remember, now long. And as for the next slide, so mainly what I've shown you previously is, again, documenting something that is invisible, but not just for the sake of archiving it, but for the sake of understanding it. I immediately became like an observer. And here, what we did in a SEAF teaching week is to go and find like objects, and then we try to relate them to each other and create multiple experiments with them. So I found a piece of paper in a warehouse, and that piece of paper made me immediately question its surrounding. And I was almost obsessed with where was it, or how was it there, and why did it become like that. Then I mean, I immediately even tried to complete it. And I don't know why I had this compulsive need to complete the list. So it's a piece of paper and it has a grid. So I completed the grid. But also it's a means of studying that object and trying to understand it. And maybe in a way or another, trying to understand me as a collector and as a laborer of thoughts. So if I would go back to the previous slides, what I wrote about this final study is, I was just a piece of something bigger, unable to be me. To be me without being referred to as a piece, unable to be a piece too without needing to be able. Regardless, I be. Being is what dominates my daydreaming. You then became the floor that allowed everything to be, and not the calculated graph outlines desperately trying to be. So here I became like a mediator between the floor, the piece, and the missing element. And that standpoint, that's the point where I'm standing, where I am the mediator of objects and their meaning, made me realize that there's a broad horizon and meaning and objects. I could turn it into anything. I can force my science fictions into multiple objects and trying to give them life back again. So here, yeah, I've talked about it. And another piece where I try to also document the invisible is through the same warehouse that I found the grid. I also noticed many writings on the wall and in objects, and those writings didn't make sense to me. They're calculations, but they're also measures of some kind of device, and they're also naming devices or labels for a missing object. So I combined them all together. Through that, if I could go back to the previous slide. Yeah, through that, what seems to be a combination of waste somehow magically turned out to be a landscape of missing elements. And this is where I found myself trying to complete it again and trying to collect them again. Again, here I'm a maker and a researcher of some sort. So I took it all together and put it in an object. So the next slide is also what I did during SEAF, which I had a big plastic sheet and I tried blowing in it. And then I tried to study the components of air. But it's a mix of science and fiction again. And the list is written here. And now for the works that tied up to my final body of work, which is non-land, trying to understand what is this place called non-land. And again, you would find many fictionist elements into it. So I turned non-land into a list and I tried to understand what is it made of. Again, you can see some of them are organic matter, minerals, vegetation, a yearning symphony, a gritty feelings when rubbed between the fingers. And here I talked about sand, the unbothered arrangement of sand beneath me, the marching footsteps in the early afternoon of Fridays, the line of intersection between two planes, cursing the line of intersection between two planes, and an itch in your throat. And then lastly, I've made a map that describes or that gives directions for this place that is doesn't exist. And here I was fascinated by the idea of a map, because a map is not just a paper, it's folds and the remaining of paper. And I will end with a video that would hopefully describes or map my mental process altogether. So just a second. So still this research about this space or this non-land is ongoing, and there are not many answers to this, and a lot of questions. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Athoub, so much for sharing your process and your thoughts with us. And next we have Malak.
Hi, that was beautiful, Athoub. So my name is Malak Elghuel. I'm a Libyan multidisciplinary artist, and I'm going to talk about the final work that I've created for the show. and the process behind it. So the thing that I was looking at mostly was change and the idea of change, specifically moments of sudden change where something happens sort of bigger than you that shifts your life. And with change, I was looking at time and place because those were the measures of that change. And from that, I started making marks. And from the marks, I created a sound piece as a final outcome. For the pieces that I'm talking about, the first one is called If I Could Count You, which is a 10-meter long paper scroll of tiny dots. And those dots represent the displaced people, internally displaced people in Libya for the past year. And in that work, I was trying to sort of represent a number that doesn't really make you feel anything when you hear it because we became so desensitized to numbers. But then when you visually try to represent it, it sort of gives you a different idea of the situation and so on. And from that point, I realized that it's still like I was still talking about people, but representing them in dots. But then I wanted to reach out and talk to individual people who are going through this. And then from that point, I started creating the second work, which was a series of conversations that I've had with people. And from that conversation, I gathered information, and the majority of that information I classified based on time and location, and those time and location became the marks that would create the final melody. And the second artwork is called If I Could Trace You, If I Could Hear You, both because of the impossibility of the situation and the impossibility of counting a number that keeps on changing when a situation is still there. Yeah, and the video that I'm going to show is basically the process behind it, which is not part of the final artwork whatsoever, but it is sort of the backbone of that work. So yeah, thank you.
Malak, can we just test the volume if it's all right?
Yeah.
hello. احنا نسكن في بداية صلاح الدين، وهي طبعا تعتبر منطقة في جنوب غرب طرابلس، بداية جنوب غرب طرابلس. لكن هي الفكرة ان احنا قريبين هذا على مطار مهدي. المطار ورانا بالضبط، وفي شارع الخلاطات وشارع المطبات، هذا كله قريب لي. منطقة هذه طريق المقبرة مكتوب عليها شاشة كبيرة، منطقة عسكرية يمنع الدخول، ما نقدرش تخشيها أصلا. احنا شارعنا اللي فيه شارع دبي. المهم احنا طلعنا من الحوش اوفيشلي شهر 10. طلعت يوم 23/12 وكان يوم 3 في نوفمبر. قعدوا من ديسمبر ما يقدروش يخشوا الحوش. يعني نحوش في هذا بتاع بذرة من شهر 10 ما عادش شفتها إلا بعد نهاية الحرب. عاش بالضبط خشيتها في المنطقة دي. عاش قعدت فيه بكل من ديسمبر اللي هو احنا في شهر 8. كويس، استغفر الله، احنا طلعنا في شهر 4 باهي، لكن وي لوست اكسس للحوش والجهات دي في شهر 10. اقول لك علاش. كان ماشي للشغل زي الناس العادية ويخدم في الاتحاد الأوروبي ولا حاجة. خلاص خشوا لنا. خشوا قرر يخش لي حوشة. مدرعات ودبابات وكل شيء كذا حوشنا بالضبط. فقنا الساعة 8 الصبح على أصوات رصاص، يعني رصاص عادي كنا نسمع فيه، وبعدين بدأ شوية أقوى. فقنا من النوم ما عرفوش اللي صاير، راقدين نوم عادي، ما كانش في حاجة ولا أي حاجة، يمكن مشكلة ما بين كتبتين يعني. فقلنا لهم وش اللي صاير وكل شيء، قالوا لنا يفضل حكومة تطلع. كنت ماشية للجامعة ونطفي العطيات، ويوم الخميس بدت الحرب، ويوم الأحد يعني كنا نازلين، فهمتي؟ فخلال 4 أيام تغيرت الحياة يعني بشكل غريب. المهم جات هنا قعدت على اساس ليله سنين من ولدي يعني، عرفتي؟ شويه حبيبتي يا نور عيني من هذيك الطلعه طبعا ما عادش وليت. مش قعدنا سنه ونص برا الحوش وشهر وحوشي محجور. يوم اللي طلعت حاجات طبعا واحده تعشنا تصلي وأصلا تصحي تصل ظهرك.
صار النقاشات كلهم عن الباك لأنه ما كانش عندنا وقت حتى نفكره. أخذنا اللي قدرنا ناخذوه يعني من أوراق مهمة وحاجات التقييم.
واللي زي ما يقول اللي ما خط حمله يعني وما غلا دمله بالعربي اللي طلعها.
منعش ممكن في ربع ساعة لأن الحين كانت 9 الصبح وكناش كنا فايقين يعني فينا حتى اللي قاعدين راقدين فمو قدرت أنا كلها كي
اختارت درتها المرة فاتت من حلقات فدتها النوع ما ستيش ورقة ما ستيش حاجة طلعنا بكل هدوء يعني زي ما يقولوا لأننا نعتبر خدينا على الموضوع عرفتي عاش في صدمة.
والله اللي خذيت أوراقي طبعا وفعلا لا تقوى غير 1000 مال.
رخصتي بطاقتي الشخصية بطاقتي الجامعة.
لكن كل ما تتولي كل ما تشوفي حاجات تكوني وتبدأ تفكر متاع what if I lose this what if I don't get to be here again. واحدة من الحاجات اللي كان شوف صعب أنه خليت ترم ست متاعي كلها خليتها غادي الحوش مضروب ومحروق ومش عارف شنو وأنا فرحان خمس كان.
والدجاجات؟
لا بقى من الحرب الكائنات في ليلة كان انفجار قريب بينا هلبة نط الصبح لقيت المكان عرفت خافوا وعرفت طاروا ما فهمتش كله الفروج والدجاجات هناك حرب راهو حرب غنية حرب مش معقولة كل الأسلحة كل الانفجارات كبيرة ضرب لنا نعرفوا حتى نوع السلاح اللي طيارة نعرفوه واللي يبصر شو هو واللي انفجارات والدنيا هذه كلها.
قسم سكن جيتنا كلهم ولا منطقة عسكرية.
شفنا ناس في التليجراف على بيضاء.
بدأت تصير حاجات يعني المطار مش يقصد فيه بالطيران يقصد فيها عشوائيا يعني هيك يعني مثلا لو إن 10 طلعوا مستهدفين من المطار واحد بيصيب من المطار و9 بيدخلوا كان حاسين بالرنج هذا.
والحرب أصلا زادت في نهاية شهر 8 معاش ولا صعب اللي مش بدنا نمشي ضروري بس وقتها الفترة هذيك خشنا للداخل خشونا كسروا الباب بتاع البوش when they start living in the house. طبعا هذا هو اللي حيشلي في جيتنا كله مش عشنا بس يعني.
هو صح الشعور إن أنا ما نعرفش وين في نهاية هذه وين تمشي فيها الموضوع هذا ولذلك يا زايد هل نلقى حوش زي ما أنا خيلاتنا ولا نلقى مسدود؟
يعني طلعنا في سيت بلا ما يعني نكونوا متأكدين إن إحنا حنلقوا حوش هل حنقعدوا في مكان هل حنقعدوا في سيارات يعني المهم طلعنا من المكان اللي شفناه حكم الجيران كلهم طلعوا المعارك كانت تبقية.
رجعت هنا مع البيت ما عنديش وين نمشي طبعا.
بدنا احنا سكننا في حوش خوي ومرته وساره مشوا لحوش ماليها هي عندي so we can accommodate.
والأخير كان للدولة بالنسبة كان فيها أكثر أمان.
يعني بعيد على حوشي إلا حوشي يعني طبعا يعني حوشي مش وحشاتنا فعلا. ما خاطرش نتكلم ما خاطرش ندوي ما نخمم في حوشي هذا نخمم في حوشي اللي نبني فيه. تتروحي طايعة يا بلد عرفتي. المهم لقيت روحي انني الهواء احساس واحد مش يعني وراي حاجة عرفتي بتتغير حياتي من الأول وجديد وبنبدأ من أول وجديد عرفتي كيف هو هذا إحساس واحد مش ما أعرفش كيف نوصفه ما أعرفش حسي روحك مش في مكانك هذا الأمور مش في مكانك.
بديش أوصف لك كيف كان شعورك تخيلي أنت هاشكم مش 8 شهور ولا سنة ولا اللي هو وبتمشي تلقيه في حالة شو devastating اللي ما تقدرش تخشي له شو تكفي في العتبة بتاع الباب بس take a deep breath وسكر الباب وتمشي وعارف إن أنت تقدرش تقول اللي أنت شفته توا اللي ولا حد.
مشيت تغربتي وقعدتي في مكان سنة ونص فهمتي فتحسي بالعكس الحوش اللي انت عايشة فيه هو اللي مات الغربة.
ده شعور الله لا توريه لبلاد يا ملاك وربنا يعوض وإن شاء الله ما يوريه في حد وإحساس شيء مفهوم هو شيء
كل ذكرياتنا على الأرض الصور وكل شيء يعني لما تخش الحوش تلقي ذكرياتك الصور الحوايج الألعاب الأمور هي عرفتي مكانات اللي كنت تعملي فيهم معرفتينهم وكان فيهم الذكريات بتاعها كلها على الأرض. عرفتي تحسي شعور هذا مش عاهل بقى.
يعني الدار الفردي كلها مضروب. كان عندنا باب الدار المختفي كليا، احنا شو الشباب عندنا أشياء ما فيش ملامح باب، ما فيش شيء. بالنسبة لي أنا داري كلها خسرتها حرفيا، ما كانش فيها ولا حاجة. فقاعدة لليوم هيك مثلا ما فيش، أنا كأني بدأت نعيش حياة جديدة من سنتين بس، مش قبلها عندي 20 سنة يعني عايشتها.
عبارة عن هي ذكريات تخليها بريك وتحاولي إنك أنت تمشي مكان وتبدي من جديد زي ما بيقولوا. عرفتي؟
لكن واحدة من الحاجات اللي وجعتني هلبة دار النوم تاعنا، هو مضروب قذيفة هيك من برا، كان من حيطها محروقة كلها من داخل. ما جربتش إني أخش الحوش، أنا طبعا الباب متطربق مش موجود أصلا.
طبعا ولي الحوشي بنحاول إن الرملة مش لاني، لأن أجلال مات نشحى ونتأسف، ما نقول لا يوم ناس ماتوا يعني، وأنا كان ماتت شجرة ولا نبتة ولا شيء. يلا الحمد لله.
الخسائر ما بتنحسبش بالطريقة هذه. كان ديما كان تصير لنا مقارنات إن باهي الحمد لله تجدكم في الحوش، وباهي سنتوا، وباهي ولدتوا، وباهي مش عارف شنو كل شيء. لكن
في حاجات تعوض، في حاجات من حوشهم من الأول في هي كانت أوفرت الحمد لله، وتوها ماشيين في الصيانة وقريب نكمل إن شاء الله.
اللي صاير إن أوكي الحوش ممكن دينا صيانة ويولي كل شيء، لكن يعني الناس اللي عايشين في الحوش هذا معقول ما حيولوا زي قبل بعد عاشور مثلا. يعني قعدنا فترة طويلة الديار نفسهم اللي برا بس ما عشان نقدروا نرقدوا فيهم، ما عشان نقدروا نخشوا لهم، يا دوبك يعني عادت في راسنا الصورة اللي شفناها.
الإنسان يعني في حاجات عاشها مستحيل يقدر يتغلب عليها بسهولة، لكن هو بس عليه توه إنه هو يقول أنا كويس. أنت مرات تكون متلخبطة، فوضى، مش فاهمة حاجات هذه تخليك أولوياتك في الحياة ضروري تترتب. اليوم كويس معناها الحمد لله.
It's not gonna go back to the way it was، لكن we move on إن شاء الله.
يعني الشجرة الحاجة الوحيدة اللي إن أنا كنت في المكان هذا هي سنة ونصف، مفيش حد يعني يعطاها مية أو أهتم بها، لكن هي في الوقت هذا كبرت هلبة وطت على الدنيا. عرفتي؟ جذر صغير يطلع من الشجرة هي، عرفتي، ونامي تحتها كأنها شكل الظل يعني حوالين ذكرياتنا، تبكتها، سميها شو تبي. عرفتي؟
I thought if I could count you, mark you, hear you, then somehow I could trace you. Just as I thought if I could move you, systemize you, hide you, then somehow I could trace you. When I started, you were only 200K. I thought no way I could reach you. 7 months later, I was still trying, but you went ahead and doubled up. Now I wonder if the 400K is even there, but it is. 1, 2, and maybe 7 of you were there for me to hear. Sorry, I meant I was there for you to share. I asked you what, when, and where. You said here and there. For some it passed, for most it's still there. You shared, I heard, so maybe your here and there could be a sound for them to see. Maybe then, as I play your here and now, traces of you could change your thereafter.
مرة أنا ما أخافش صراحة، أنا شجاعة ما أعرف روحي، ديما نضل دايرة أملي في الله وخلاص، واللي بيصير يصير يعني. ما نقعدش نتوقع في السيء، عمري ما توقعت حاجة سيئة، ديما نتوقع في الأحسن. والدنيا يعني الدنيا حلوة على شي فشتوا فيها بالحرب وبالتهديم وبالخراب هذا وهذا. يا ريت يتفقوا الناس كلهم ويعيشوا بسلام بس.
Thank you, Malak. All right. So the last but not least, Nabla, if you'd like to introduce yourself and the work for SEAF.
Hi everyone, I'm Nabla. I'm an artist apparently. Would you like to show the photos of? I'm just going to quickly introduce the work that is currently at Warehouse 421. It's located within the courtyard and adjacent to the courtyard. The installation consists of what is essentially a staircase that's built or constructed using felt, gypsum, and steel, and a series of cyanotypes. It's an installation which seeks to reconcile the schism between the tangible and the unknown. It attempts to manifest a vision of the barzakh, metaphysical heterotopia, a zone which allows for an exploration into liminality, detainment, and discovery. The video that I'm about to show you is not a work in itself. My plan, were it not for COVID, were it not for the pandemic, was to host a poetry reading in the courtyard itself amongst the work. Because for me, this is not so much of a sculpture as much as it is part of a larger scenography. But obviously because of COVID restrictions, what I put together was I reached out to a few friends and I put together recordings of each one of them reading a poem or a piece of literature or a piece of writing, which speaks to the themes of displacement, corruption, and fascism. And I thought that a poetry reading that kind of, sorry, that's my dog, a poetry reading that sort of addresses these heavy topics at this moment in time can be quite healing, to see this kind of act of solidarity, to talk about things that are difficult, to talk about the way we're feeling, could be comforting or provide some hope to, or where there is no hope, really. So Zara, if you could please play the video. Yesterday to good Zonomus eyes. Zenem yani learned to the sky. God eyes. Kiss desires. Yawan rise, Chanamain line.
لا شيء يعجبني، يقول مسافر في الباص. لا الراديو ولا صحف الصباح ولا القلاع على التلال، أريد أن أبكي. يقول السائق: انتظر الوصول إلى المحطة وابكي وحدك ما استطعت. تقول سيدة: أنا أيضاً، أنا لا شيء يعجبني. دللت ابني على قبري فأعجبه ونام ولم يودعني. يقول الجامعي: ولا أنا لا شيء يعجبني. درست الأركيولوجيا دون أن أجد الهوية في الحجارة. هل أنا حقاً أنا؟ ويقول جندي: أنا أيضاً، أنا لا شيء يعجبني. أحاصر دائماً شبحاً يحاصرني. يقول السائق العصبي: ها نحن اقتربنا من محطتنا الأخيرة فاستعدوا للنزول. فيصرخون: نريد ما بعد المحطة فانطلق. أما أنا فأقول: أنزلني هنا. أنا مثلهم لا شيء يعجبني ولكني تعبت من السفر.
كيف نعيش بعيد عن الحياة والناس اللي نحبهم؟ في حاجات صعبة نكتب لها، في أوقات تعرف إن الدنيا مش حتولي زي قبل. في نوعين، في اللي طلعوا مع شغل أبوك، الواحد فيهم حاول طريقة إنه يعالج نفسه من ذاته، لكن أعرف إنك لو طلعت كل اللي خليته وراك حيتلاشى، وإنك لو تفكر تولي حتشوف كل حاجة حبيتها تجود. لكن في اللي يقول ما عمرك ما تطلع، كيف تخلي بلادك؟ لأنك لو طلعت حتولي زي الجدار بعيد، قاسي وأجوف، بين إيش ندير؟ عشان ندير لو منقدرش نطلع منقدرش نولي.
Di ba tayo narito upang maging malaya at upang palayain ang iba? Ako'y walang hinihiling, ika'y tila ganun din. Sadya palayain ang isa't isa. Ang pag-ibig natin walang hanggang paalam at habang magkalayo, papalapit pa rin ang puso. Kahit na magkahulay, tayo magkasama sa magkabilang dulo ng mundo. Ang bawat simulay ay siyaring, katapusan ay patutungguhan pa. Ang ating magsinta sa biglang tingin, kita'y walang kinabukasan. Subalit di malupig ang pag-asa. Ang pag-ibig natin walang hanggang paalam at habang magkalayo, papalapit pa rin ang puso. Kahit ay magkasama sa makabilang dulo ng mundo.
حم يا حمام شيل السلام ودوا البلد، قول للولد يا دمنا حب لمنا، حب لمنا بس مو طمأنينة انشراح، شيل همنا وخلي الرماح، عانينا كم أدمينا كم، فرجنا في حالنا الأمم ولومنا عن كرسي السجن، مو كفل ورثنا من الحمم أسف هرسنا من الحمم، نزف الكبسنا من الجراح، أرضاً سلاح. كنت أنت كيف يقع الوطن في حرب آخر تقوم تقيف على شيك بياض، أرضاً سلاح. يا حمام لغناك حم بين رشة الغيم استحم، ما في السماوات إلا خير، الواطهية المشقوقة غم مسيوقة سم مبقوقة دم مفلوقة بالنخب القباح، أرضاً سلاح. وطني القنوع من ظلم زمني القبوع تحت العتم، لما الشموع باعوا الظلم. وطني الخشوع كمل العلم مما علم به العلم، وطن الصبر لا من يغيظ. وطني العزيز المحترم بعد السلام عليكم أثنيت بك فهم، وحد القلم ما يزيل بلم، وعلى كيفنا ما كيف الرمم. يا نسوي السلام السوداني أشم فوق القمم، يا إما يا المخب الخبوب ذمم الحبوب النافخ الدم، يا مستجدين النعم ممن لثم الجزم، العجم بلحاس موايد البرم، نسفي نهم ناس عوايد العدم، لا قدر الله فالندم. يا أهل الصلاح الصاحة صاح، أرضاً سلاح.
तुम रात लिखो हम चांद लिखेंगे, तुम जेल में डालो हम दीवार फांद लिखेंगे, तुम एफआईआर लिखो हम है तैयार लिखेंगे, तुम हमें कत्ल कर दो हम भूत बन के भूत लिखेंगे, तुम्हारे कत्ल के सारे सबूत लिखेंगे। और तुम अदालतों से बैठकर चुटकुले लिखो, हम सड़कों दीवारों पर इंसाफ लिखेंगे, बहरे भी सुन ले इतना जोर से बोलेंगे, अंधे भी पढ़ ले इतना साफ लिखेंगे। तुम काला कमल लिखो हम लाल गुलाब लिखेंगे, तुम जमीन पर जुल्म लिख दो आसमां पे इनकलाब लिखा जाएगा, सब याद रखा जाएगा, सब कुछ याद रखा जाएगा। और तुम्हारी लाठियों से गोलियों से जो कत्ल हुए हैं मेरे यार सब, उनके याद में दिलों को बर्बाद रखा जाएगा, सब याद रखा जाएगा, सब कुछ याद रखा जाएगा। और तुम सियाहियों से जो झूठ लिखोगे हमें मालूम है वो हमारे खून से ही सही सच जरूर लिखा जाएगा, सब याद रखा जाएगा, सब कुछ याद रखा जाएगा। और मोबाइल टेलीफोन इंटरनेट भरी दोपहर में बंद करके, सर्द अंधेरी रात में पूरे शहर को नजर बंद करके, हथौड़ियां लेकर दाफतन मेरे घर में घुस आना, मेरा सर बदन मेरे मुख्तसर सी जिंदगी को तोड़ जाना, मेरे लगते जिगर का टुकड़ा मेरे लगते जिगर को बीच चौराहे पे मार कर यूं बंद बेअंदाज झुंड में खड़े होकर तुम्हारा मुस्कुराना, सब याद रखा जाएगा, सब कुछ याद रखा जाएगा। और दिन में मीठी मीठी बातें करना सामने से, सब कुछ ठीक है हर जुबान में तुतलाना, रात होते ही हक मांग रहे लोगों पर लाठियां चलाना, गोलियां चलाना, हम ही पे हमला करके हम ही को हमलावार बताना, सब याद रखा जाएगा, सब कुछ याद रखा जाएगा। और मैं अपनी हड्डियों पे लिख के रहूंगा ये सारे वारदात, मैं अपने हड्डियों पे लिख के रहूंगा ये सारे वारदात, तुम जो मांगते हो मुझसे मेरे होने के कागजात। अपनी हस्ती को तुमको सबूत जरूर दिया जाएगा, ये जंग तुम्हारी आखिरी सांस तक लड़ा जाएगा, सब याद रखा जाएगा। ये भी याद रखा जाएगा किस किस तरह से तुमने वतन को तोड़ने की साजिशें की, ये भी याद रखा जाएगा किस किस यतन से हमने वतन को जोड़ने की ख्वाहिशें की, ये भी याद रखा जाएगा। और जब कभी भी जिक्र आएगा जहां में दौरे बुज़दिली का, तुम्हारा काम याद रखा जाएगा। और जब कभी भी जिक्र आएगा जहां में दौरे जिंदगी का, हमारा नाम याद रखा जाएगा। कि कुछ लोग थे जिनके इरादे टूटे नहीं थे लोहे के हथौड़ियों से, कि कुछ लोग थे जिनके ज़मीर बिके नहीं थे इज़ारदारों के कौड़ियों से, जैसे तुम्हारे बिक गए हैं। कि कुछ लोग थे जो डटे रहे थे तूफा के नूह के गुजर जाने के बाद तक, कुछ लोग थे जो जिंदा रहे अपने मौत की खबर आने के बाद तक। भले भूल जाए पलक आंखों को मूंदना, भले भूल जाए ज़मीन अपनी दूरी पे घूमना, हमारे कटे परों की परवाज को, हमारे फटे गलों के आवाज को याद रखा जाएगा। तुम रात लिखो हम चांद लिखेंगे, तुम जेल में डालो हम दीवार फांद लिखेंगे, तुम FIR लिखो हम हैं तैयार लिखेंगे, और तुम हमें कत्ल कर दो हम बन के भूत लिखेंगे, तुम्हारे कत्ल के सारे सबूत लिखेंगे। और तुम अदालत से बैठ के चुटकुले लिखो हम सड़कों दीवारों पर इंसाफ लिखेंगे, बहरे भी सुन ले इतने जोर से बोलेंगे, अंधे भी पढ़ ले इतना साफ लिखेंगे। और तुम काला कमल लिखो हम है लाल गुलाब लिखेंगे, तुम जमीन पे जुल्म लिखो आसमां पे इंकलाब लिखा जाएगा, सब याद रखा जाएगा, सब कुछ याद रखा जाएगा। ताकि तुम्हारे नाम पर ताउमर लानतें भेजी जा सके, ताकि तुम्हारे मुजस्समों पर कालिके पोती जा सके, तुम्हारे नाम तुम्हारे मुजस्समों को आबाद रखा जाएगा, सब याद रखा जाएगा, सब याद रखा जाएगा।
Boz bulutla kaçlı cilge boysuna, baradla kıblata başın aldın. Çırmalalla mingi tavunu boynuna, köp muçimayık karaydıla başından. Bulutlağa terilmezge küreşe, dev sadaklı uçu kebek tezilip, birbirinden kapar bile süleşe, kalmasın diye onsurak üzülüp. Siz uçasız kıblata baturnala, savkalete kanatka kıçıra, bir közüyle kü soklağın çözürnala, yüreklige tağırıqla çıqara. Sizni kanat tübüyüzge jurtuz, hoşamaydı sizge meni cazığım. Bugün kanat tübümde jurtumu, bek eskertken kesin ozancarsığım. Kim biledi endi sizni nin çağız, qaytmay kalır cazbla birge tavlağa. Siz qaytırğa tavladan nin çabız, kete bara soklandırğa savladan.
Un día, los intelectuales apolíticos de mi país serán interrogados por el hombre sencillo de nuestro cuerpo. Se les preguntará sobre lo que hicieron cuando la patria se apagaba lentamente, como una hoguera dulce, pequeña y sola. No serán interrogados sobre sus trajes, ni sobre sus largas siestas después de la merienda, tampoco sobre sus esteriles combates con la nada, ni sobre su ontológica manera de llegar a las monedas. No se les interrogará sobre la ontología griega, ni sobre el asco que sintieron de sí cuando alguien en su fondo se disponía a morir cobardemente. Nada se les preguntará sobre sus justificaciones absurdas, crecidas a la sombra de una mentira rotunda. Ese día vendrá los hombres sencillos, los que nunca cupieron en los libros y versos de los intelectuales apolíticos, pero que llegaban todos los días a dejarles la leche y el pan, los huevos y las tortillas, los que descosían la ropa, los que manejaban los carros, descuidaban sus perros y jardines, y trabajaban para ellos, y preguntaban, ¿qué hicisteis cuando los pobres sufrían y se quemaban en ellos gravemente la ternura y la vida? Intelectuales apolíticos en el dulce país, no podréis responder nada. Os devorará un buitre de silencio las montañas. Os rueda el alma vuestra propia miseria y caeréis avergonzados de vosotros.
Thank you, Nabla. And we're gonna start off with a discussion question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So for any of the artists, feel free to answer this. How do you consider scenarios in which visitors become performers within your work, like Malak with your music box, Nabla with the reading, and Athoub with your floor piece about the waltz?
I'm sorry, what was, I misheard the first half of your question. How does what become performance, sorry?
Visitors.
Others.
Yeah, visitors of like performers.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's not a work. It was meant to be an event. And I thought that it would be nice to kind of introduce like a community-led or community-driven event into the program for our exhibition, which would have been really nice if you think about it, having live poems, live recitations while we all sit together and kind of share these emotions and talk about things that we're concerned about. So it's not really like, none of us are performers. All my friends kind of just did me like a nice favor. I can't say that it's really a performance for me. Yeah.
For me specifically, I think the music sound piece, the first intention was for the viewer to play the music box themselves, and then that would generate the sound. But I think because of the new restrictions, that was not possible. And so it ended up with being the sound pre-recorded and sort of played on a loop. But the importance of having someone play the instruments and generate the sound sort of implicates the person who is viewing the work, and then they become part of it. So, but it was also important because there was like teeny tiny text that was part of the sheets that you could only read when you're so close to it. And then there's this like intimate moment between the person and the object itself, but then it also implicates you in a sense where you are now aware of it, therefore you are now somehow responsible also.
I do.
As for me, I mean, the term, it's not necessarily the term performance per se, in the terms of like physical action, but more as an emotional performance of the mind, such as the action of researching. That's all to me become a sort of labor, and that labor becomes the performance in itself.
All right, and we'll take one question from the audience. I think we have time for one.
Yeah, maybe one, maybe a couple. Going back, there's a question from Sarah or Sarah. I don't know how to, I'm not sure how you pronounce your name, but I don't know if you want to unmute and ask the question.
Yes, hi. First of all, congratulations for everyone. The work overall looks amazing. I wanted to ask Malak, from the conversations that you've had with these people, what was the most shocking thing you've heard? And how did you manage to get in touch with these people in the first place? Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So getting in touch with people was through family and friends, so people who know people, or social media. So I actually talked to a few people who I found through social media. They're complete strangers, and that was an interesting experience. But for something shocking, there were a lot of things that were shocking, to be honest. Some in a good way, some in a bad way. But I think that one of the most interesting things was that a lot of those houses, when people came back, obviously they were vandalized and they lost most of their belongings and they were sort of destroyed and stuff. But then people left words on the walls. So there was some kind of dialogue happening, especially in the areas where the control kept on shifting. So one power would take it and then the other would come and take it. And so it was like back and forth, and they would leave each other like pieces of dialogue. And there was one house where the guy said, they wrote someone's name and his nickname, actually, and his nickname was called Grandizer, as the cartoon character, and they called him Al-Batal at the beginning, you know, like the hero. And then when the other people came, they were like, oh, like Al-Shahid, because like they killed him or whatever. And then it's like death will come for you or something. And so they were having this sort of weird dialogue between them through the walls and the houses. But yeah, that was interesting.
I think we have one more for Malak, and it's Sarah. Do you want to unmute and ask the question?
Yes, thank you all, of course. For Malak, I was really interested in how the interviews that you conducted were then like translated into the music that you produced. Like maybe you can speak a little bit about like how those were translated and why you chose to turn them into music specifically.
For that, I sort of I made a system based on time, duration, and location, which were the sort of the three main factors that most people sort of highlighted anyway. So whenever they start talking about their story, they start with when and how long they've been away from their homes, or if they came back or if they didn't, and like how long was that and where did they go. And so I was taking the time, the duration, and the location as the main points. And from that, I created a system of like vertical, horizontal, and then overlapping lines. So for the dates, that was sort of the vertical points. And then for the duration, it was sort of more horizontal straight lines. And then for the locations, this is where I used this website. It's the live online map where it shows you like the updated territories day by day. You can go back to like 3 years ago or like literally day by day. And I was taking those sort of dramatic shifts of the territories and the lines of the land. during the time where they left and when they came back and those key moments. And then from that, I was tracing that line and the overlapping lines. And from that, it generated sort of that sound through the music box. Why the sound? I think because it's sort of, I like how there was a process and a shift in medium, but I also wanted them to have a voice and to be heard, but not necessarily like directly, because I felt like I couldn't, I didn't figure out a way to do these people and these stories justice in a way that was proper. And so I didn't want to use the actual sounds and conversations for the final piece. But then for now, I feel like it is a very important part of the process that also should be highlighted, but not as sort of a final form. So I think that's right.
All right, thank you everyone for your questions. Also for Nabla's video, I have all the poems and the poets. I just pasted it for reference if anyone would like to take that list. I know it was quite, at the end it was hard to write everything down if you're interested in that. So also, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you all for asking your questions and for joining us today. And I hope you enjoyed the work that was shown today. Once again, Community and Critique will close in 1 week's time, and I highly encourage you go and see it while you can before December 20th. And yeah, that's all we have today.
And thank you everyone for joining. This is the last episode of Artist Talks for this season, and inshallah there will be a second one in the spring, so watch out for that. We have an amazing list of artists already lined up, so super exciting. And you can follow me on Instagram for any updates on that. And if we didn't get to any questions or another question popped up for any of the artists, feel free to reach out to them on Instagram or through me, and I can direct you to them. Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining and for the support, and go check out the show. Thank you.